Imagine standing in the world's largest city in the year 1200, surrounded by nearly 1 million people. But there's something impossible about this place. It's built entirely in a swamp. This is Angkor, the capital of the Khmer Empire, where ancient engineers somehow convinced water to flow uphill, created reservoirs that could hold billions of gallons, and turned uninhabitable marshland into the most magnificent urban center the world had ever seen. For over 6 centuries, this Hindu-Buddhist empire in Southeast Asia defied every rule of geography and engineering, building a civilization that floated on water. Here's something that'll keep you pondering as you drift off. This empire moved more earth than the builders of the Panama Canal, all with bamboo baskets and sheer determination. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love seeing our global community of history lovers and insomniacs. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Close your eyes, slow your breathing, and prepare to float downstream through a story that flows as gently as the sacred waters that built an empire.
The air here smells like wet iron and crushed lychee, skin sharp, sweet, with a metallic tang from the mountain's sandstone bleeding into the springs. You're not just breathing jungle humidity, you're inhaling the same air Jayavarman II choked on when he climbed this plateau in 802 AD, determined to carve a kingdom from monsoon runoff. His sandals would have sunk into this exact muck as he marched toward a natural amphitheater of rock, where Brahmin priests waited to anoint him, Devaraja, god-king with water scooped from a spring nobody had yet thought to bottle as mineral water. Watch your step. The ground here is a living palimpsest. Beneath your feet, invisible until modern lasers revealed them, are the grid lines of Mahendra Parvata, the first capital of the Khmer Empire. Those lasers showed something Jayavarman II couldn't see: a city plan as precise as a chessboard etched into terrain so steep that modern hikers still curse its slopes. But the king wasn't here for urban planning. He was here to stage a theatrical coup against the universe itself. You round a bend in the trail, and there it is, Rong Chen, a 5-tiered pyramid of laterite blocks stacked like a child's neglected toys. This is where the coronation ritual supposedly happened, though historians still argue whether the actual event occurred here or at a now lost site deeper in the jungle. Either way, picture the scene: priests chanting in Sanskrit, their voices drowned by cicadas, as they pour sacred water over Jayavarman's headwater that had trickled through 1,000 stone lingers carved into the riverbed downstream. Those phallic symbols of Shiva weren't just art, they were hydraulic engineering. Every drop that flowed over them became blessed, turning the entire Siem Reap River into a liquid hymn to fertility. But let's not romanticize the grit. However divine the ritual, Jayavarman's sandals were definitely ruined. The same red clay staining your imaginary toes once bogged down elephants hauling sandstone blocks for temples, and that holy water, by the time it reached the plains, it was a churning soup of mosquito larvae and whatever the royal cooks had dumped upstream. Yet this muck sustained an empire. The Khmer didn't just use water, they married it, worshipped it, etched their gods into its skin. Here's a fun twist: that sacred river now fuels Siem Reap's boutique hotels. The same springs that blessed kings are today bottled as premium mineral water, sold to tourists who'd faint if they knew they were drinking filtered runoff from Shiva's stone, lingas. Imagine a 9th century priest seeing his holy infrastructure repurposed for spa days. He'd probably toss a cobra into the nearest infinity pool. As dusk stains the jungle indigo, you spot something glinting in the undergrowth, not a temple relic, but a discarded soda can. It's a reminder that Phnom Kulen's story isn't frozen in time. The mountain has been a capital, a battlefield, a Khmer Rouge stronghold, and now a national park where teenagers snap selfies at waterfalls. Yet through it all, the water keeps flowing. The same springs that crowned an empire still murmur secrets to the roots of kapok trees. You kneel to dip your hand in a pool, and the water is shockingly cold, a relic of its journey through the mountain's sandstone veins. Somewhere beneath your palm, invisible lasers map buried causeways while, overhead, a bat flickers past like a charred scroll fragment. This is where empires begin, not with a bang, but with a ripple. Your sandals kick up ochre dust as you descend Phnom Kulen's slopes, leaving the sacred springs behind for the simmering plains. Down here, the air doesn't just feel hotter, it tastes hotter, a gritty cocktail of dried mud and desperation. Welcome to Hariharalaya, Jayavarman II's first proper capital, where the Khmer Empire's grand ambitions are about to collide with a very undivine problem: thirst. You're standing in what archaeologists would later call the hydration crisis of the 9th century. The city's population is ballooning, think 50,000 mouths to feed, bathe. And blessed the monsoon rains play favorites. For 6 months, the world drowns. For 6 months, it cracks like old pottery. The Royal Engineers have a solution though: channel the Siem Reap River into a lattice of canals, except the river's mood swings make a teenager's look stable. One week it's a languid stream perfect for floating lotus offerings. The next, it's a chocolate, brown monster gulping down rice paddies. Here's the kicker: Jayavarman's subjects aren't just drinking this water, they're marinating in it. Every ritual bath, every temple consecration, every royal foot-washing ceremony demands liquid divinity. The king's priests have ingeniously solved the holiness supply chain by carving 1,000 Shiva lingas into the riverbed upstream. Now every drop flowing over these stone phalluses gets pre-blessed before reaching the capital. It's holy tap water if your tap occasionally spewed leeches and the occasional drowned monkey. But holiness doesn't irrigate rice. By 820 AD, the city's reservoirs are puddles of mosquito frat parties. Farmers dig wells, but the groundwater's laced with enough arsenic to make a Brahmin's beard fall out. Pro tip: if your well water tastes like bitter almonds and impending doom, maybe stick to coconut milk. The king's engineers propose a radical fix: the East Beret, a hand-dug reservoir stretching 7.5 kilometers, roughly the distance between your patients and that one relative who still thinks colonize Mars is a solid retirement plan. Let's pause to appreciate the madness. Without cranes, trucks, or union brakes, thousands of workers are moving 8 million cubic meters of earth using baskets and sheer willpower. That's enough dirt to bury Manhattan under 6 feet of Cambodian topsoil. The Beret's walls rise like earthen fortresses, but the real genius lies in the spillway stone channels designed to bleed off excess monsoon rain. Or at least that's the theory. During construction, a particularly enthusiastic downpour turns the half-finished basin into a mudslide that wipes out 3 worker camps. Historians still argue whether the resulting casualties were divine retribution or just really bad OSHA compliance. Meanwhile, Jayavarman II is facing a PR nightmare. His subjects are drinking from puddles that double as public toilets, and the royal astrologers keep blaming Mercury retrograde. The king's solution: distract everyone with architecture. He orders a new temple pyramid at Rongchen. Its steps so steep, pilgrims develop calf muscles that could crack walnuts. It works. The people grumble less about dysentery when they're too busy wheezing up sacred staircases. but the water problem won't evaporate like morning mist on Tonle Sap. Enter the trapping-ancient Khmer water tanks that look like swimming pools designed by overachieving beavers. These communal reservoirs become social hubs where farmers gossip, kids learn to swim, and everyone pretends not to notice the algae bloom, giving the water a concerning glow. Modern Siem Reap's hotel infinity pools are just trappings with better marketing. As the dry season tightens its grip, you join the queue at a trapping where the water level's lower than a snake's belly. A toddler ahead of you drinks deeply, unaware that centuries later, scientists will find his fossilized gut bacteria and write very judgmental papers about 9th century sanitation. When your turn comes, the water tastes like warm pennies and resignation. The crisis peaks when Jayavarman's favorite Elephanta moody bull named Indradyumna refuses to bathe in the palace moat. His mahouts blame poor water quality, but really, the beast just hates the new lotus-scented bath oils. The king takes it as an omen. By moonrise, engineers are sketching plans for a second, even larger reservoir west of the city. It'll take decades to build, require enslaving half the population, and probably cause a minor deforestation crisis, but hey, at least the elephants will stay fragrant. As you bed down in a worker's hut, the night hums with the sound of mosquitoes and ambition. Somewhere, a bureaucrat is tallying water rations on a palm leaf spreadsheet. A potter sculpts filter jugs with pores fine enough to strain out parasite larvae. Spoiler, they're not. And deep in the palace, Jayavarman II stares at a clay model of his kingdom, wondering if he should have stuck to that nice dry mountain. You're ankle-deep in mud that smells like fermented tamarind and crushed ambition. Around you, 1,000 workers bend like human commas, their bamboo baskets groaning under the weight of earth that will become the East Berets' eastern dike. This isn't just a reservoir they're building, it's a geological rebellion. For the next decade, these calloused hands will move enough soil to bury Manhattan, all without a single wheelbarrow or OSHA-approved hard hat. The blueprint exists only in the king's head and the Brahmin priest's star charts. Engineers pace the future shoreline with knotted ropes, calculating slopes by squinting at the horizon. Their secret weapon? A cocktail of rice, wine, and divine intervention. Every morning, workers pour libations into the trenches, praying to Vishnu that the monsoon doesn't liquefy their progress. It's 902 AD, and failure means more than a missed deadline. It means a city of 50,000 drinking from puddles where dysentery blooms like lotus flowers. Watch how they work. Teams of 4 dig with wooden spades, their rhythm syncopated by a drummer pounding out warnings for collapsing trenches. The soil here is stubborn, a mix of iron-rich clay and the ghosts of last season's rice harvest. Each basketful travels a human chain stretching to the horizon, past hand to blistered hand until it slumps onto the growing dike. At night, the site hums with fireflies and complaints. Why build a lake when the monsoons already drown us? Grumbles a teenager nursing blisters. An overseer overhears and thwacks him with a bamboo rod. The king doesn't pay us to think, he growls. He pays us to move mountains, and move them they do. By 908 AD, the East Beret stretches 7.5 kilometers, a liquid rectangle so vast, you could sail from one end to the other and lose sight of land. Its walls rise 5 meters high, buttressed by laterite blocks that future archaeologists will mistake for temple foundations. The secret lies in the spillways, stone channels carved with serpent motifs that hiss during heavy rains, bleeding off excess water into the Siem Reap River. Or at least that's the theory. During the inaugural monsoon, a misaligned spillway turns the northern dike into a mudslide that buries 3 villages. Survivors fish their cooking pots from the sludge, while priests declare it Shiva's dance of destruction. But the Barai isn't just engineering its theatre. On the day of consecration, Yasovarman II floats across the reservoir on a golden barge, trailing petals in his wake. The water, pre-blessed by 1,000 submerged lingers, glitters with misplaced holiness. Farmers whisper that the king's engineers added crushed moonstone to the shallows for extra sparkle. Meanwhile, downwind, the royal bathhouse discharges enough saffron-scented runoff to turn the western shore into a turmeric swamp. Here's the twist: historians still debate over lukewarm beer. Was this liquid colossus a rice paddy's lifesaver or a narcissistic metaphor? The Barai's dimensions mirror sacred ratios from the Vastu Shastras, its length precisely 1/100th of the distance between Angkor and Mount Kulen. Brahmin priests claim it's a scale model of the cosmic ocean, but the math-loving engineers argue it's just efficient hydraulics. Meanwhile, the rice farmers don't care. They're too busy digging illegal canals to siphon water into their fields. Centuries later, you'll stand on the dried-up bed where cassava plants now claw at the cracked earth. That smell of sun-baked clay, it's the same odor that haunted the workers' nightmares. Run your fingers over a laterite block. Its pockmarks mirror the calluses on those long-dead hands. And if you listen closely, the wind still carries echoes of the drummer's beats, now syncopated with the whine of tourist minibuses on the nearby highway. The East Barai's true legacy isn't in the textbooks. It's in the DNA of every Cambodian child who learns to swim in the West Barai's murky shallows. It's in the way modern engineers still scratch their heads at the spillway designs. And it's in the uneasy truth that every empire, no matter how divine, is just one drought away from becoming a footnote in the mud. You're watching a miracle unfold in slow motion, one bamboo pole at a time. The year is 915 AD, and you're squatting beside a Khmer engineer who's calculating water pressure using nothing but knotted string and the phases of the moon. His name is Kirti Pandita, though everyone calls him the madman who thinks dirt can hold back rivers. He's sketching hydraulic principles that won't be formally described in European textbooks for another 400 years. All while chewing betel nut and occasionally spitting red juice into his calculations. The East Barai's construction site sprawls before you like an anthill designed by caffeinated gods. Without a single iron tool, steam engine, or engineering degree, these workers are moving 55,000 cubic meters of earth per day. That's roughly equivalent to excavating the foundation for a modern skyscraper using only soup spoons and determination. The secret weapon? Human geometry. Teams of 20 workers form living pulleys, their bodies becoming the mechanical advantage that physics textbooks would later diagram with neat little arrows. Watch this. A crew hauls laterite blocks using a contraption that looks like a bamboo spiderweb, the stone siege weighing as much as a small elephant slide along wooden rails greased with pig fat and crushed lotus stems. The rails themselves rest on log rollers that workers constantly reposition, creating a conveyor belt that would make Henry Ford weep with envy. When a block gets stuck, they don't call for a crane. They call for grandmother Sophia, a 70-year-old woman whose understanding of leverage borders on witchcraft. She wedges a bamboo pole under the stone, positions 3 workers at precise angles, and whispers what sounds like a prayer but is actually trigonometry in ancient Khmer. The real engineering marvel isn't the blocks, it's the foundation. Beneath your feet lies a sandwich of clay, sand, and crushed laterite that would make a modern geotechnical engineer question their career choices. The Khmer discovered that alternating layers create a waterproof seal stronger than concrete. How? Trial, error, and the occasional catastrophic dike failure that wiped out worker camps. Survivors would study the wreckage, adjust the recipe, and try again. It's the scientific method powered by desperation and rice wine. But here's where it gets weird. The workers aren't just building, they're praying. Every layer of earth gets blessed by a rotating caste of priests who sprinkle holy water while chanting Sanskrit verses about Vishnu's cosmic navel. The blessing isn't symbolic, it's quality control. If the priest stumbles over a syllable, the workers tear up that section and start over. Modern archaeologists call this ritual perfectionism, but the workers call it job security. Better to rebuild a dike than explain to Yasovarman why his reservoir leaks like a broken coconut. The human cost is staggering. Workers drop from heat exhaustion, dysentery, and the occasional cobra bite. Pro tip: always check your bamboo basket for uninvited serpentine passengers. The dead get buried in the dike itself, their bones becoming part of the foundation. Historians still argue whether this was practical disposal or ritual sacrifice, but the workers' families prefer the term eternal employment benefits. Meanwhile, the king's engineers are solving problems that won't officially exist for centuries. How do you calculate water pressure without Arabic numerals? You use rice grains as counting tokens and pray your arithmetic doesn't flood the capital. How do you survey a 7.5-kilometer perimeter without theodolites? You train elephants to walk straight lines, while riders drop colored stones at measured intervals. The elephants occasionally wander off to raid mango groves, creating survey errors that modern GPS would find embarrassing. The most ingenious innovation is the spillway system. These aren't just drainage channels, they're hydraulic computers carved in stone. During monsoons, water flows through a series of chambers that automatically regulate pressure. Too much flow and stone baffles redirect the surge into overflow channels. Too little, and the system conserves every drop for the dry season. It's analog engineering that makes modern flood control look like a toddler's bathtub toys. As twilight paints the construction site purple, you join the workers around their cooking fires. They're sharing stories about the ghost engineer, a mysterious figure who appears during crises with solutions that shouldn't work but do. Some say he's the spirit of an ancient master builder. Others claim he's just Kirti Pandita after too much palm wine. Either way, his advice has prevented 3 major collapses and 1 minor apocalypse. You bed down on a reed mat, listening to the night sounds, frogs croaking in the half-filled reservoir, workers snoring in bamboo dormitories, and somewhere in the darkness, the soft splash of Grandmother Sophia testing water levels with her bare feet. Tomorrow, they'll move another 55,000 cubic meters of earth. Tonight, they dream of the day when their muddy crater becomes a mirror for the gods. You're standing in what looks like a cosmic blueprint drawn in mud and mathematics. The East Beret isn't just a giant bath tube, it's a mandala you could sail across, where every measurement whispers secrets about the universe's hidden geometry. The Khmer engineers didn't just dig a hole and hope for the best, they carved divine proportions into the landscape, creating a reservoir that doubles as a 3-dimensional prayer wheel, spinning slowly under the Cambodian sun. Picture this: you're floating on a bamboo raft in the center of the Beret, and every direction you look reveals sacred ratios. The length-to-width proportion mirrors the golden rectangle that Renaissance artists will discover centuries later. The depth follows lunar calculations that predict optimal water storage during different monsoon cycles. Even the spillway angles align with constellation patterns, turning overflow management into celestial choreography. It's as if Pythagoras and a hydraulic engineer had a baby, and that baby grew up to move mountains. The genius lies in the overlap. Every spiritual symbol serves a practical purpose, and every engineering solution carries religious weight. Those serpent carvings on the spillways, they're not just decorative. The undulating channels slow water flow, preventing erosion during monsoon surges. The lotus motifs carved into the intake gates actually function as primitive filters, their stone petals catching debris before it clogs the distribution channels. When priests bless the water flowing over these carved flowers, they're also performing quality control on the city's drinking supply. But here's where it gets deliciously weird. The entire system operates on what modern engineers would call hydraulic astrology. Water levels rise and fall according to lunar cycles. Not just because of tidal influence, but because the Khmer timed their irrigation releases to match astrological calendars. Full moon means maximum flow to the rice paddies. New moon triggers conservation mode. It sounds like mystical nonsense until you realize it perfectly matches seasonal farming cycles and groundwater recharge patterns. The gods, apparently, were excellent hydrologists. You wade through the shallows where stone lingers poke up like ancient periscopes. Each one is positioned to channel water through carved channels that spiral around the shaft before flowing onward. The spiral pattern isn't random. It creates a vortex that oxygenates the water, preventing stagnation and reducing mosquito breeding. Medieval Cambodians accidentally invented water treatment technology while trying to maximize divine blessings per gallon. Talk about overachieving. The distribution network reads like a sacred text written in flowing water. Main channels follow cardinal directions, their widths calculated using finger breadths and royal cubits. Secondary canals branch off at angles determined by Sanskrit geometric principles, creating a fractal pattern that maximizes coverage while minimizing construction effort. Historians still argue whether this efficiency was intentional engineering or happy accident, but the farmers didn't care. Their rice grew, their families ate, and the gods seemed pleased with the arrangement. Here's a fun detail that would make modern city planners weep. The entire water system doubles as a transportation network. Those sacred canals are actually highways for boats carrying temple stones, rice harvests, and the occasional royal procession. The water depth varies seasonally, creating different traffic patterns throughout the year. During monsoons, heavy cargo barges lumber through the main channels. In dry season, shallow, draft fishing boats dart through the distributaries like aquatic motorcycles. It's Venice, but with more crocodiles and better urban planning. The maintenance schedule follows religious festivals, turning infrastructure repair into community celebration. During the water festival, teams of workers dredge sediment from the channels while dancers perform on floating stages. Spillway cleaning coincides with Vishnu's birthday, because apparently even gods appreciate good plumbing. The work songs they sing while hauling mud contain engineering instructions disguised as prayers, oral tradition that preserved technical knowledge through centuries of political upheaval. As evening light turns the beret into molten copper, you notice something modern tourists miss: the water level markers carved into the retaining walls. These aren't just flood gauges, they're a hydraulic calendar that tells farmers when to plant, priests when to perform water ceremonies, and engineers when to open or close the spillways. Each mark represents generations of observation, trial, and error, encoded in stone for future civilizations to puzzle over. You drift toward shore as fruit bats begin their nightly hunt, their wing beats rippling the sacred geometry reflected on the water's surface. Somewhere in the distance, a temple bell chimes the evening hour, its bronze voice carrying across water that flows according to laws both divine and practical. Tomorrow, this liquid mandala will continue its ancient work, blessing rice, moving stones, and proving that the most elegant solutions often emerge when engineering bows to the sacred, and the sacred learns to flow like water. You're crouched beside a rice paddy at dawn, watching a farmer named Suryavarma, not the king, just a guy with an unfortunately royal name, perform the daily miracle of turning sacred water into breakfast. His calloused hands guide irrigation flow with the precision of a temple dancer, opening and closing sluice gates in a rhythm passed down through 5 generations. This isn't just farming, it's hydraulic choreography, where every drop carries the weight of empire and the promise of another meal. The water trickling into his paddy started its journey in those blessed springs of Phnom Kulen, flowed over 1,000 stone lingers, pooled in the East Beret's cosmic geometry, and now arrives at his field carrying enough divine authority to make rice grow and kings sleep soundly. But Suryavarman doesn't think about cosmic oceans when his children are hungry. He thinks about timing, soil salinity, and whether that suspicious green algae bloom upstream means the royal elephants have been bathing again. Watch how the system works. Water flows from the Beret through a main canal wide enough for royal barges, then branches into progressively smaller channels that snake between rice fields like liquid capillaries. Each farmer controls his section with bamboo gates that can be raised or lowered with a single rope pull. It's medieval automation, gravity-powered, monsoon-fueled, and surprisingly effective at preventing the kind of water disputes that usually end with someone getting stabbed with a farming implement. But rice isn't the only crop drinking from this hydraulic network. You wade through flooded gardens where lotus flowers bloom for temple offerings, their roots anchored in mud that's been blessed by proxy. Nearby, coconut palms lean over irrigation ditches, their fronds rustling with the sound of water flowing toward fish ponds where carp grow fat on rice bran and royal kitchen scraps. The entire landscape pulses with controlled flooding, a wet season symphony conducted by an empire that learned to dance with the monsoons instead of fighting them. Here's where it gets interesting. The water system doesn't just feed crops, it feeds egos. Every morning, King Suryavarman VII, the actual king, not our farmer friend, takes his ritual bath in water that's traveled the entire sacred circuit. The royal bathhouse connects directly to the main distribution canal, meaning the king literally bathes in the same water that irrigates peasant rice paddies. It's either profound spiritual democracy or the world's most expensive plumbing mistake. Historians still argue whether this was intentional symbolism or just really bad urban planning. The bathing ritual itself is pure theater. Picture this. The king descends marble steps into a pool fed by carved spouts shaped like Makara sea monsters. As he submerges, priests chant Sanskrit verses while musicians play instruments that sound like drowning cats. The used bathwater, now doubly blessed by royal skin contact, flows into a secondary canal that irrigates the palace herb gardens. Those herbs season the royal meals, creating a closed loop of sanctity that would make a modern sustainability consultant weep with joy. But let's talk about the real heroes, the bath attendants. These unsung hydraulic engineers maintain water temperature using a system of heated stones and bamboo pipes that would make Roman bath builders jealous. They also serve as early warning systems for water quality issues. If the king's bath attendant notices unusual algae, strange odors, or the occasional floating fish corpse, he signals upstream to investigate. It's quality control disguised as royal pampering, and it probably prevented more waterborne diseases than all the temple prayers combined. The social hierarchy flows like water through this system. Royal family members bathe first, their used water cascading to noble families, then to wealthy merchants, and finally to farmers like our friend Suryavarman. who's perfectly happy to irrigate his rice with water that once touched aristocratic ankles. It's trickle-down economics in the most literal sense possible, and somehow it works better than most modern wealth distribution schemes. Evening brings the daily ritual of gate closing, when farmers throughout the region coordinate water flow for the night. Surya Varman pulls his rope, and his bamboo gate drops with a splash that echoes across the paddies. Similar sounds ripple through the landscape as hundreds of farmers perform the same action, their timing synchronized by temple bells and the position of Venus above the horizon. It's a hydraulic orchestra playing a song of survival, one note at a time. As fireflies begin their nightly dance above the flooded fields, you realize you're witnessing something that won't be replicated for centuries. A civilization that made water sacred without forgetting it was also practical. The same liquid that blessed kings also grew the rice that fed the workers who built the temples that housed the gods who blessed the water. It's a perfect circle, flowing endlessly through the heart of an empire that understood the most profound truth of all. Everything is connected, especially when you're standing knee-deep in it. You're huddled under a palm leaf shelter as the sky splits open like a broken dam, unleashing the kind of rain that makes Noah look like an amateur. Welcome to monsoon season in 10th century Cambodia, where 6 months of drought give way to 6 months of liquid chaos that would make modern meteorologists reach for their anxiety medication. The air tastes like copper pennies and impending doom, while thunder rolls across the landscape like the gods rearranging furniture in a cosmic temper tantrum. This isn't just weather, it's the Empire's annual stress test. The East Beret, that magnificent feat of hydraulic engineering you watched them build, is about to receive more water in 3 months than most reservoirs see in a year. The spillways that looked so clever during construction now seem woefully inadequate as chocolate-brown torrents surge through the channels, carrying entire trees, confused livestock, and the occasional farmer's hut that forgot to stay anchored. But here's the twist that keeps Khmer engineers awake at night. Too much water is almost as deadly as too little. Those carefully calculated irrigation channels become raging rivers that strip topsoil from rice paddies and deposit it in places where it's about as useful as a chocolate teapot. The sacred geometry of the water system disappears under a chaotic flood that recognizes no divine proportions, only gravity and the inexorable pull toward lower ground. You splash through ankle-deep water in what used to be the royal plaza, watching palace servants frantically sandbag the treasury with bags of rice that will probably rot before the water recedes. The irony isn't lost on anyone. An empire built on water control is drowning in its own success. Those 1,000 stone lingers that blessed every drop during the dry season are now completely submerged, their sacred carvings gurgling prayers to fish that swim through what used to be temple courtyards. The human cost mounts like floodwater against a failing dike. Families evacuate to higher ground, carrying their possessions in baskets that leak almost as badly as their roofs. Children develop mysterious fevers that priests blame on angry water spirits, though modern doctors would recognize the symptoms of cholera, typhoid, and a dozen other waterborne diseases that flourish when sacred water systems become open sewers. The royal physicians prescribe prayers and herbal remedies, but mostly they just hope the floods recede before the kingdom runs out of healthy subjects. Meanwhile, the king's engineers are learning hard lessons about hydraulic hubris. Those elegant spillways work perfectly for normal monsoons, but normal is apparently a flexible concept when you're dealing with weather patterns that swing between biblical drought and apocalyptic deluge. Emergency crews work around the clock, using elephants to haul massive stones into breach points where the beret walls are starting to sag like overloaded shelves. It's crisis management with a distinctly medieval flavor. Lots of prayer, limited options, and the constant threat of catastrophic failure. But drought season brings its own special brand of misery. You're now standing in the same spot 6 months later, watching the East Baray shrink like a puddle under a blowtorch. The water level drops so low that you can walk across sections that were 20 feet deep during the floods. Fish flop in isolated pools, their gills working overtime in water that's more mud than liquid. The sacred lotus flowers that once carpeted the surface now poke up from cracked earth like botanical tombstones marking the death of optimism. Farmers dig increasingly desperate wells, following the receding groundwater deeper into earth that yields less water and more arsenic with each foot. The lucky ones hit springs, the unlucky ones hit nothing but dry sand and the growing certainty that their families will be drinking from the same stagnant pools where water buffalo wallow. It's a hydrological lottery where the house always wins and the players always lose, except for the occasional miracle well that produces sweet water and renewed faith in divine intervention. The psychological toll is worse than the physical hardship. During floods, people at least feel like they're fighting something tangible: sandbags against rising water, boats against currents, hope against despair. But drought is a slow strangulation that saps will along with water reserves. You watch farmers stare at empty irrigation channels with the hollow-eyed expression of people who've bet everything on a system that works perfectly except when it doesn't. Historians still argue whether these extreme weather patterns were normal climate variation or early signs of the climatic shifts that would eventually doom the empire. What's certain is that the Khmer water system, for all its engineering brilliance, was designed for a world where monsoons arrived on schedule and droughts lasted exactly 6 months. When nature decided to improvise, the empire's hydraulic foundation began showing cracks that no amount of sacred geometry could repair. As you bed down under stars that seem mockingly distant from earthly water troubles, you listen to the night sounds, frogs croaking in the few remaining pools, night birds calling across empty channels, and somewhere in the darkness, the soft splash of desperate farmers checking their wells one more time. Tomorrow will bring either rain or more drought, flood or continued thirst, but tonight the empire sleeps fitfully, dreaming of water that flows exactly when and where it's needed. You're standing at the edge of what will become the most audacious act of hydraulic megalomania in human history. The year is 1050 AD, and King Udayaditya Varman II has decided that the East Baray, that marvel of engineering you watched rise from mud and ambitionless, adorable, but insufficient. His new project will make it look like a backyard koi pond. Welcome to the construction site of the West Baray, a reservoir so massive that it could swallow Lake Tahoe and still have room for a small European country. The numbers alone should have sent the royal accountants into early retirement. 8 kilometers long, 2.3 kilometers wide, and deep enough to hide a 5-story temple, this isn't just a reservoir. It's a liquid monument to the dangerous intersection of unlimited power and engineering hubris. The king's engineers calculate they'll need to move 53 million cubic meters of earth. That's roughly equivalent to excavating the Panama Canal, using nothing but bamboo baskets, and the unshakable belief that gods favor the spectacularly impractical. But here's where it gets interesting. They're not just digging a hole. They're performing surgery on the landscape itself, redirecting rivers, rerouting ancient drainage patterns, and essentially telling Mother Nature that her water management skills need improvement. The Siem Reap River, which has been minding its own business for millennia, suddenly finds itself conscripted into royal service. its flow diverted through a series of channels that would make a Roman aqueduct engineer weep with envy or terror. You join a work crew hauling laterite blocks that weigh more than modern automobiles. The transportation system is pure medieval ingenuity. Wooden rails greased with elephant fat, log rollers repositioned by teams of workers who've developed biceps that could crack coconuts, and a pulley system made from braided palm fiber that somehow doesn't snap under loads that would challenge modern steel cables. When a block gets stuck, they don't call for a crane, they call for Grandmother Caesar, whose understanding of leverage has achieved legendary status among the work crews. The human cost is staggering in ways that make modern labor disputes look like polite disagreements. Workers drop from heat exhaustion, dysentery, and the occasional encounter with cobras who object to having their habitat excavated. The death toll isn't recorded in official chronicles. Kings prefer to document divine blessings rather than workplace fatalities, but mass graves discovered by modern archaeologists suggest that building the West Beret required sacrificing roughly 1 worker per 1,000 cubic meters of earth moved. Yet somehow, impossibly, the project advances. The secret lies in the organizational structure that turns chaos into choreography. Work crews operate in rotating shifts timed to lunar cycles, with fresh teams arriving as exhausted ones collapse. The entire operation runs on a complex barter system, where workers trade labor for rice rations, palm wine, and the occasional religious festival that provides blessed relief from the relentless digging, hauling, and dying. The engineering challenges multiply like monsoon mosquitoes. How do you prevent a reservoir this size from becoming a stagnant swamp that breeds diseases and disappoints gods? The answer involves creating artificial islands, underwater channels, and a circulation system that keeps water moving even during the dry season. The central island Mebane Occidental isn't just decorative, it's a hydraulic control center disguised as a temple complex. Its foundations anchored to bedrock through techniques that modern engineers still struggle to understand. But the real genius lies in the spillway design. Remember those elegant overflow channels from the East Beret? The West Beret's spillways are their steroid-enhanced cousins, capable of handling flood volumes that would overwhelm small rivers. The stone channels spiral downward in patterns that dissipate energy while creating the visual effect of water dancing with serpents. It's functional art, on a scale that makes modern public works projects look like sidewalk chalk drawings. As construction progresses, you witness something that historians still debate. Was this massive undertaking driven by practical necessity or royal ego? The kingdom's population has swollen to nearly 1 million people, all dependent on controlled water flow for drinking, bathing, irrigation, and the countless religious ceremonies that keep the gods happy and the rice growing. A drought that empties the East Beret could trigger famine, rebellion, and a kind of divine displeasure that ends dynasties. Yet the West Beret's dimensions suggest something beyond mere utility. Its proportions mirror cosmic measurements from Hindu cosmology, its orientation aligns with astronomical events, and its capacity exceeds any conceivable practical need by roughly 300%. It's as if the king decided to build a backup ocean just in case the regular one broke down. The result is a monument to the peculiarly human belief that if some water storage is good, then absolutely ridiculous amounts of water storage must be divine. As evening light turns the half-finished excavation into a landscape of golden mud and exhausted ambition, you realize you're witnessing the high-water mark of Khmer hydraulic civilization. This reservoir will outlast the empire that built it, serving as a liquid time capsule that preserves the dreams and delusions of a kingdom that believed it could engineer its way to immortality, 1 impossible cubic meter at a time. You're floating in a helicopter above Cambodia's jungle canopy in 2012, watching a computer screen that's about to rewrite everything historians thought they knew about the Khmer Empire. Below you, lasers pulse through the green darkness, mapping terrain with the precision of a divine surveyor. What emerges on the monitor isn't just trees and temple sits, the ghost of a hydraulic civilization so vast and complex that it makes modern urban planning look like finger painting. The technology is called LiDAR, light detection and ranging, and it's essentially giving the jungle a full-body X-ray. Those laser pulses penetrate the forest canopy, bounce off the ground, and return with data that reveals every bump, depression, and ancient earthwork hidden beneath centuries of vegetation. It's like having archaeological superpowers, except instead of seeing through walls, you're seeing through time itself, peeling back layers of forest to expose the bones of a lost empire. What the lasers reveal makes your brain hurt in the best possible way. That East Beret you watch them build? It's just one node in a network that sprawls across 1,000 square kilometers, an area larger than Los Angeles, all connected by channels, reservoirs, and water management infrastructure that operated as a single integrated system. The West Beret, that monument to hydraulic megalomania, turns out to be the centerpiece of an urban water grid that supplied nearly 1 million people with drinking water, irrigation, transportation, and spiritual cleansing. But here's where it gets really wild. The jungle has been hiding entire cities. The LiDAR data reveals urban centers scattered throughout the region, each one connected to the main water network by channels so precisely engineered that they maintained optimal flow rates across dozens of kilometers. These aren't just irrigation ditches, they're liquid highways that carried everything from temple stones to royal barges, creating a transportation network that functioned like medieval Venice, but with more crocodiles and better urban planning. You zoom in on a section that looks like a circuit board designed by caffeinated gods. Rectangular reservoirs connect to circular ponds through channels that branch and merge in fractal patterns. Every intersection is precisely calculated to maintain water pressure, prevent flooding, and ensure that sacred water reaches every temple, palace, and rice paddy in the network. It's hydraulic engineering that makes modern water utilities look like amateur plumbing projects run by enthusiastic but incompetent beavers. The scale is mind-boggling. The main distribution network stretches from the sacred springs of Plenom Kulen to the shores of Tonle Sap, covering an area that would encompass several modern provinces. Secondary channels branch off like capillaries, reaching isolated temple complexes and farming communities that historians didn't even know existed. The entire system operated on gravity flow, using elevation changes so subtle that modern surveyors need GPS equipment to detect them. But the real revelation is the redundancy. This wasn't just one big water system, it was dozens of interconnected systems that could operate independently or as a unified network. If one reservoir failed, water could be rerouted through backup channels. If a main canal got blocked, secondary routes maintained flow to critical areas. It's the kind of fail-safe engineering that modern infrastructure planners dream about but rarely achieve, all accomplished by people who calculated water pressure using rice grains and astronomical observations. The LiDAR data also reveals something that makes archaeologists question their career choices. The Khmer were constantly rebuilding, expanding, and improving their water infrastructure. What looks like a single, planned system actually represents centuries of continuous construction, with new channels layered over old ones like geological strata made of human ambition. Some reservoirs were expanded multiple times, their original boundaries now buried beneath later construction phases that doubled or tripled their capacity. Here's a detail that would make modern city planners weep. The entire network was designed to handle both floods and droughts simultaneously. During monsoons, excess water flowed through overflow channels into flood retention areas that doubled as dry season reserves. The system could absorb massive rainfall without flooding urban areas, then release stored water gradually during drought periods. It's adaptive infrastructure that responds to climate variability with the flexibility of a yoga instructor and the reliability of a Swiss watch. But perhaps the most stunning discovery is the sheer extent of human modification to the landscape. The LiDAR reveals that virtually every square kilometer of the Angkor region bears traces of hydraulic engineering. Natural streams were straightened, hills were terraced, wetlands were drained or expanded, and the entire topography was sculpted to optimize water flow. The Khmer didn't just build in the landscape, they rebuilt the landscape itself, creating an artificial environment that supported population densities that wouldn't be matched in Southeast Asia until the 20th century. As your helicopter circles back toward Siem Reap, you realize you've been looking at the archaeological equivalent of discovering Atlantis. Except this lost civilization wasn't mythical, was just really good at hiding under jungle canopy. The water system that sustained Angkor represents one of humanity's greatest engineering achievements, a hydraulic empire that functioned for 6 centuries before climate change and political upheaval finally overwhelmed even the most sophisticated water management in the medieval world. The irony isn't lost on modern Cambodia, where rural communities still struggle with water access, while tourists snap selfies at temples built by a civilization that had solved water distribution on an industrial scale. Those ancient channels, revealed by space-age technology, still carry water during monsoons, their 1,000-year-old engineering continuing to function long after the empire that built them has become a footnote in jungle-covered stone. You're standing waist-deep in the Siem Reap River, watching something that shouldn't be possible, a 50-ton sandstone block floating downstream like a granite lily pad. The year is 1150 AD, and you're witnessing the Khmer Empire's most audacious engineering, fetusing their vast water network as a liquid conveyor belt to transport temple stones across distances that would challenge modern logistics companies. This isn't just moving rocks, it's choreographing a ballet of stone, water, and human ingenuity that makes the Panama Canal look like a weekend DIY project. The secret lies in understanding that those magnificent reservoirs and canals weren't just for irrigation and royal bathing, they were Cambodia's medieval interstate highway system. During monsoon season, when water levels peaked, the entire network transformed into a transportation grid capable of moving massive temple blocks from quarries to construction sites dozens of kilometers away. It's like Amazon Prime delivery, except the packages weigh as much as school buses, and the delivery trucks are bamboo rafts guided by workers who navigate using temple spires as landmarks. Watch how they do it. Teams of engineers have calculated the exact water depth needed to float different stone sizes. A modest doorway lintel requires 3 feet of water, a massive foundation block needs 6 feet minimum. They time construction projects around monsoon cycles, quarrying stones during dry season and shipping them when the rains transform their canal network into a liquid superhighway. It's project management that would make modern contractors weep with envy, assuming they could stop laughing at the apparent impossibility of it all. The loading process is pure medieval engineering poetry. Workers dig temporary basins beside quarries, then flood them using portable dams made from clay, bamboo, and fermented prayers. Stone blocks get rolled onto wooden platforms that function as primitive dry docks. When the artificial harbor fills with water, The platforms float, carrying their granite cargo like Stone Age aircraft carriers. It's shipbuilding technology applied to rocks, and somehow it works better than most modern heavy lifting operations. But the real genius lies in the navigation system. Those canals you watch them dig with such precise geometry, they're not just water channels, they're liquid roadways with built-in traffic control. Stone markers indicate maximum load capacities for different canal sections. Wider channels handle the massive blocks destined for temple foundations. Narrower distributaries carry smaller architectural elements to outlying shrines. It's a hydraulic postal system where the mail weighs several tons and occasionally sinks if someone miscalculates the buoyancy equations. The human infrastructure is equally impressive. Canal pilot specialists who know every current, depth change, and underwater obstacle guide the stone barges using techniques passed down through generations. They read water like modern GPS systems, interpreting ripples, color changes, and flow patterns to navigate channels that shift with every monsoon. When a barge runs aground, they don't call for tugboats, they call for Grandfather Pisac, whose ability to refloat stranded stone blocks borders on supernatural, assuming you believe in physics-defying bamboo levers. Here's where it gets wonderfully absurd. The entire transportation network operates on a schedule determined by religious festivals and astronomical events. Temple construction deadlines align with auspicious dates calculated by court astrologers, meaning stone deliveries must arrive precisely when the stars favor architectural projects. It's just-in-time manufacturing controlled by cosmic forces, and somehow it produces construction timelines that would make modern project managers question their faith in Gantt charts. The scale of the operation is staggering. During peak construction periods, hundreds of stone barges navigate the canal network simultaneously, carrying everything from massive Naga serpent sculptures to delicate dancing Apsara reliefs. The main channels become aquatic traffic jams where royal barges carrying temple architects share waterways with cargo vessels hauling foundation stones. Traffic control consists of temple bells, flag signals, and the occasional royal decree that gives certain shipments right of way over others. But the system's true elegance emerges during the dry season, when falling water levels strand barges in carefully planned staging areas. These aren't accidents, they're features. Engineers design temporary harbors where stone shipments wait for the next monsoon, creating supply depots that ensure construction materials arrive exactly when needed. It's inventory management that uses seasonal flooding as a natural warehouse system, storing temple blocks in muddy lots until rising water refloats them for final delivery. The environmental impact would make modern conservationists reach for their protest signs. Thousands of tons of stone traffic scour canal beds, alter flow patterns, and occasionally dam waterways when particularly large blocks get wedged in narrow passages. The Khmer solution? Build bigger canals. When stone transport overwhelms existing infrastructure, they simply dig new channels, creating an ever-expanding network that grows to accommodate increasingly ambitious architectural projects. As twilight paints the water purple, you watch the day's last stone barge disappear around a bend, its granite cargo destined for a temple that won't be completed for another decade. Somewhere upstream, quarry workers are already cutting tomorrow's shipment, while downstream, temple builders wait for stones that began their journey in mountain quarries and will end as carved gods smiling from temple walls. It's a supply chain that spans the kingdom, connecting sacred mountains to sacred architecture through the simple miracle of making rocks float on blessed water. You're kneeling in the foundation pit of Angkor Wat, your hands covered in mud that's been blessed by 1,000 years of groundwater seepage. Above you, the temple's towers pierce the sky like stone prayers, but beneath your feet lies the real miracle, a foundation system that's kept 0 tons of carved sandstone from sinking into Cambodia's swampy soil. This isn't just construction, it's geological alchemy that transforms liquid earth into solid bedrock through techniques that modern engineers are still trying to reverse engineer. The secret starts 20 feet below ground level, where Khmer builders discovered that Cambodia's clay soil becomes rock-hard when properly dewatered and compressed. But here's the twist: they didn't fight the groundwater, they married it. The foundation system operates like a massive stone sponge, channeling water flow to create controlled drainage that prevents both flooding and subsidence. It's hydroengineering disguised as temple construction, and it's been working flawlessly since 1113 AD. Watch how they built it. Teams of workers dig foundation trenches during dry season, racing against the monsoons that will flood their excavations. The trenches follow precise geometric patterns that mirror the temple's sacred proportions, but they also function as drainage channels that direct groundwater away from load-bearing walls. Every foundation stone gets bedded in a mixture of crushed laterite and sand that creates a permeable layer, allowing water to flow beneath the temple without undermining its structural integrity. But the real genius lies in the underground water management system that most visitors never see. Beneath Angkor Wat's courtyards runs a network of stone-lined channels that collect rainwater, route it through filtration chambers, and discharge it into the surrounding moat. The system operates entirely on gravity flow, using elevation changes so subtle that water appears to flow uphill through what ancient texts describe as the gods' hidden rivers. Modern hydrologists call it brilliant subsurface drainage, but the Khmer called it making the earth drink properly. The moat itself isn't just decorative, it's a massive hydraulic foundation that keeps the temple from sinking into the swamp. The 200-meter water barrier creates hydrostatic pressure that stabilizes the surrounding soil, while the constant water circulation prevents the kind of soil settlement that has toppled countless other monuments. It's like building on a waterbed, except the waterbed is engineered to support the weight of a small mountain made of carved stone. Here's where it gets deliciously complex. The entire foundation system doubles as a water treatment plant. Runoff from the temple's stone surfaces flows through a series of settling ponds where sediment drops out and organic matter decomposes. The clarified water then percolates through sand filters before entering the moat, creating a closed-loop system that keeps the sacred water clean enough for religious ceremonies. It's medieval water treatment technology that produces better results than some modern municipal systems. The construction process required solving problems that wouldn't officially exist for another 800 years. How do you prevent concrete from cracking when you don't have concrete? The Khmer developed a mortar made from rice paste, tree sap, and crushed shells that remains flexible enough to accommodate thermal expansion while strong enough to bind massive stone blocks. How do you waterproof underground chambers without modern sealants? They used a plaster made from ground laterite and elephant dung that creates an impermeable barrier that's still functioning after a millennium of monsoons. But perhaps the most impressive feat is the foundation's self-healing properties. When minor settling occurs, and it always does, the permeable stone bedding allows the structure to adjust gradually rather than cracking catastrophically. The underground drainage system automatically compensates for changes in groundwater levels, while the moat's hydrostatic pressure provides constant support that prevents differential settlement. It's adaptive engineering that responds to environmental changes like a living organism. The human cost of this underground marvel rarely appears in temple inscriptions. Workers died from cave-ins, drowning in flooded excavations, and the various tropical diseases that flourish in standing water. The foundation pits became temporary graveyards where the unlucky got buried in the very structures they were building. Modern archaeologists occasionally find skeletal remains mixed with foundation stones, grim reminders that every temple rests on a bedrock of human sacrifice disguised as workplace accidents. Yet somehow, impossibly, it all works. 9 centuries after construction, Angkor Wat's foundations remain stable, while modern buildings in Phnom Penh sink into the same swampy soil. The temple's towers still rise perfectly vertical, their stone joints tight enough to exclude rainwater. The moat continues its hydraulic dance, rising and falling with seasonal water levels, while maintaining the precise pressure needed to support the temple's massive weight. As evening light filters through the temple's stone lattices, you realize you're standing inside a machine designed to last forever. Every stone block rests on foundations that channel water with the precision of a Swiss watch and the durability of geological time. The groundwater flowing beneath your feet carries the same mineral signature as the sacred springs of Phnom Kulen. Completing a hydrological circuit that connects mountain to temple through liquid pathways carved in stone and sustained by faith in the marriage between engineering and eternity. You're standing on the central causeway of Angkor Thom in 1200 AD, watching the world's largest medieval city pulse with the rhythm of controlled water flow. Around you, nearly 1 million people wake, work, worship, and sleep in a metropolis that shouldn't exist, a city built in a swamp, sustained by an empire's worth of hydraulic engineering, and somehow thriving in defiance of every geographical law that says major urban centers belong on rivers, coasts, or at least somewhere that doesn't flood annually. The morning begins with the sound of water, temple bells echoing across reservoir surfaces, the splash of royal barges navigating palace canals, and the gentle gurgle of household drains emptying into stone-lined sewers that would make Roman engineers weep with professional jealousy. Every building, from humble wooden houses to towering temple pyramids, connects to a water distribution network that delivers fresh drinking water, removes waste, and provides the constant flow of sacred liquid needed for the 1,000 daily rituals that keep gods happy and citizens hydrated. But this isn't just a big city with good plumbing, it's a hydraulic organism where every neighborhood functions like a specialized organ in a vast urban body. The royal quarter pulses with ornamental pools and ceremonial fountains that demonstrate divine authority through conspicuous water consumption. The merchant districts buzz with workshops that use controlled water flow for everything from silk dyeing to metal forging. The residential areas sprawl in neat grids where every household compound includes a private pond for bathing, cooking, and the occasional emergency fish farming. The population density should be impossible. Modern urban planners calculate that Angkor's peak population, somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million people, created a density comparable to modern Manhattan. Except Manhattan has skyscrapers, and Angkor had strict height limits imposed by religious architecture codes. The secret lies in vertical water management, multi-story buildings with rooftop cisterns, elevated aqueducts that carry water over crowded streets, and basement-level storage tanks that provide water pressure through gravitational engineering that predates municipal water towers by 7 centuries. Here's where it gets wonderfully complex. The entire city operates on a water-based social hierarchy that makes modern class systems look refreshingly simple. Royal family members bathe in water that flows directly from the sacred springs. their used bathwater cascading through a series of purification pools before reaching noble households. Wealthy merchants receive water that's been blessed by temple ceremonies but not royally contaminated. Common citizens get perfectly functional water that's traveled the entire sacred circuit, picking up spiritual authority and mineral content in equal measure. The waste management system would make modern sanitation engineers question their career choices. Every building connects to stone-lined drains that channel wastewater into settling ponds where solids separate and organic matter decomposes under the tropical sun. The clarified effluent flows into constructed wetlands where aquatic plants filter out remaining contaminants before the water rejoins the main canal system. It's biological water treatment that produces cleaner discharge than many modern cities, all powered by gravity, bacteria, and the occasional sacred crocodile that keeps the system free of unwanted visitors. But the real miracle is the food production system that feeds this impossible metropolis. The city's water network doesn't just supply drinking water, it creates an urban agriculture system that produces enough rice, vegetables, and fish to sustain 1 million people without importing food from distant provinces. Rooftop gardens use greywater from household drains. Neighborhood fish ponds recycle organic waste into protein, and floating gardens in the reservoir margins grow vegetables in soil that's constantly refreshed by controlled flooding. The transportation network reads like a medieval Venice designed by hydraulic engineers with delusions of grandeur. Major boulevards run alongside canals that carry everything from royal processions to garbage barges. Secondary streets bridge smaller waterways where neighborhood boats deliver fresh water, collect waste, and provide the aquatic equivalent of modern public transit. During monsoon season, when streets flood anyway, the entire city transforms into an archipelago where boats become the primary mode of transportation. The maintenance requirements are staggering in ways that make modern infrastructure budgets look like pocket change. Thousands of workers dredge sediment from canals, repair spillways damaged by seasonal flooding, and maintain the countless pumps, filters, and distribution systems that keep water flowing to every corner of the metropolis. The work never stops. Teams operate around the clock, their schedules coordinated by temple bells and astronomical observations that determine optimal times for different maintenance tasks. Yet somehow, impossibly, it all functions with the precision of a cosmic clockwork. Water flows where it's needed, when it's needed, in quantities calculated by engineers who measure flow rates using rice grains and predict seasonal variations by observing the behavior of sacred fish. The city breathes with the rhythm of monsoons, expanding during floods and contracting during droughts, but never quite drowning and never quite dying of thirst. As evening light turns the canal network into a web of molten gold, you realize you're witnessing the peak achievement of hydraulic civilization, a city that exists in perfect symbiosis with water, where human engineering and natural cycles dance together in a partnership that sustains nearly 1 million people in the middle of a tropical swamp. It's urban planning that won't be equaled for centuries, powered by the simple recognition that cities, like empires, are just organized ways of making water flow exactly where you need it most. You're standing in the same spot where that magnificent 1 million-person metropolis once thrived. But now the only sound is wind whistling through cracked spillways and the nervous chatter of monkeys who've inherited a hydraulic empire they can't operate. The year is 1431 AD, and you're witnessing the slow-motion collapse of the world's most sophisticated water management system, not from invasion or earthquake, but from something far more insidious. The climate has decided to stop following the rules. The monsoons, those reliable seasonal clockworks that the Khmer Empire had danced with for 6 centuries, have gone completely rogue. Instead of the predictable 6 months of flooding followed by 6 months of drought, you're experiencing weather patterns that swing between biblical deluges and Saharan aridity with the randomness of a cosmic dice game played by drunk gods. The East Baray, that marvel of hydraulic engineering, sits bone dry while the West Baray overflows its spillways, creating floods that wash away the very infrastructure designed to control them. But it's not just the timing, it's the intensity. When the rains come, they arrive with a violence that overwhelms even the most sophisticated overflow systems. You watch helplessly as a single storm dumps more water in 3 days than the reservoirs normally receive in 3 months. The carefully calculated spillways, designed for normal monsoons, become inadequate fire hoses trying to drain swimming pools. Stone channels crack under pressure loads they were never meant to handle, while earthen dikes dissolve like sugar cubes in a hurricane. The drought periods are equally catastrophic, but in slow motion. You're witnessing the 3rd consecutive year of failed monsoons, watching water levels drop so low that the sacred lotus flowers in the royal pools have withered to brown stalks poking from cracked mud. The underground springs that once fed the system have retreated deeper into the earth, forcing well diggers to chase the water table down through layers of clay that yield nothing but disappointment and the occasional cobra. Here's where the engineering hubris becomes tragically apparent. The Khmer water system was designed for a stable climate that no longer exists. Those precise calculations of reservoir capacity, spillway flow rates, and canal gradients all assumed that weather patterns would remain constant forever. When nature decided to improvise, the empire's hydraulic foundation began failing in ways that no amount of sacred geometry could fix. It's like watching a Swiss watch try to function underwater, beautiful, precise, and completely useless under the new conditions. The human response is a mixture of engineering desperation and religious panic. Teams of workers frantically dig new channels to handle unprecedented flood volumes, while priests perform increasingly elaborate ceremonies to appease whatever cosmic forces have disrupted the water cycle. The king's engineers propose building even larger reservoirs, but the royal treasury has been drained by decades of climate-related infrastructure repairs. Meanwhile, farmers abandon their flooded or desiccated fields, creating refugee streams that overwhelm the urban water supply. The social fabric unravels along hydraulic lines. Neighborhoods that once shared water resources now guard their wells with armed sentries. The elegant water-sharing agreements that sustain the empire's social hierarchy collapse when there's not enough water to share. Royal bathing ceremonies become irregular, then rare, then abandoned entirely as the sacred springs fail. When kings can't guarantee daily divine ablutions, their claims to god-king status start looking suspiciously mortal. But perhaps the most heartbreaking sight is the gradual abandonment of the great temples. Without reliable water for daily ceremonies, ritual purification, and the constant maintenance that stone architecture requires in tropical climates, the temple complexes begin their slow surrender to the jungle. You watch priests perform abbreviated ceremonies with whatever water they can collect from rain barrels, their voices echoing through courtyards where sacred pools have become mud wallows frequented by wild boar. The engineering solutions become increasingly desperate and decreasingly effective. Workers attempt to deepen existing reservoirs but hit bedrock or contaminated groundwater. They try to extend canal networks to reach more distant water sources, but the new channels either flood uncontrollably or dry up completely. The sophisticated hydraulic computer, that once regulated water flow throughout the empire becomes a collection of broken stone channels that carry nothing but memories and the occasional flash flood. Historians still argue whether the climate chaos was caused by global weather pattern shifts, regional deforestation, or just the kind of random climatic variation that periodically devastates civilizations unlucky enough to depend on predictable rainfall. What's certain is that by 1430 AD, the water system that had sustained an empire for 6 centuries was failing faster than it could be repaired, creating a cascade of agricultural, economic, and political crises that no amount of engineering genius could solve. The final irony comes during the last great monsoon of the empire's peak period. You watch as torrential rains fill the reservoirs to capacity, the spillways function perfectly, and for one brief, shining moment, the entire hydraulic system operates exactly as designed. But there's nobody left to appreciate it. The population has already begun its exodus to more reliable water sources along the Mekong River, leaving behind the world's most sophisticated water management infrastructure to be slowly reclaimed by a jungle that doesn't need engineering to thrive. As twilight settles over the abandoned canals, you realize you're witnessing one of history's great lessons about the relationship between civilization and climate. Even the most brilliant engineering is only as reliable as the weather patterns it's designed to manage. You're watching the jungle perform the world's slowest magic trick, making an entire hydraulic empire disappear one vine at a time. The year is 1500 AD, and where once 1 million people navigated liquid highways between towering temples, now only the sound of dripping water echoes through stone corridors being slowly digested by roots that treat 1,000-year-old engineering like an elaborate trellis system. This isn't destruction, it's botanical archaeology in reverse, where nature methodically erases the evidence of human ambition with the patience of geological time. The process begins subtly, almost politely. Tiny seeds, carried by birds or blown by wind, lodge in the mortar joints between massive sandstone blocks. During monsoons, these seeds sprout into innocent-looking saplings that seem harmless enough to ignore. But beneath the surface, their roots are performing hydraulic engineering in reverse, following the same water channels that once carried sacred liquid throughout the empire. What took human engineers decades to build, plant roots can dismantle in years, using water pressure and freeze-thaw cycles to split stones that survived centuries of monsoons. The strangler figs are the most dramatic performers in this botanical takeover. You watch one massive specimen that's wrapped around a temple tower like a living straitjacket, its trunk now thicker than the stone structure it's slowly crushing. The fig began as a seed deposited by a monkey in a roof crevice. Over 2 centuries it's grown into a tree that's literally eating the temple from the outside in. Its roots have infiltrated every crack, following the ancient mortar lines with the precision of a demolition expert who happens to photosynthesize. But the real destruction happens underground, where root systems are systematically dismantling the foundation drainage that kept these temples standing. Remember those brilliant subsurface channels that prevented water damage and soil settlement? Tree roots treat them like a buffet of nutrients and moisture, growing through the stone-lined passages until they block the very drainage systems they're feeding on. It's ecological irony at its finest. The jungle is using the empire's own engineering against itself. The canal network suffers a different kind of botanical colonization. Without constant dredging and maintenance, the waterways become gardens where lotus flowers, water hyacinth, and floating rice create an aquatic jungle that's beautiful but completely non-functional for transportation or irrigation. You wade through channels that once carried royal barges, now so choked with vegetation that you can barely see the water beneath the green carpet. Fish still swim in these overgrown canals, but they're wild species that have replaced the carefully managed aquaculture systems that once fed the empire. The reservoirs transform into something that would make landscape architects weep with either joy or despair, depending on their aesthetic preferences. The East Baray becomes a seasonal wetland where migrating birds nest in the ruins of stone spillways. During dry season, the exposed bottom reveals the geometric precision of the original construction. But monsoons turn it into a temporary lake, where water lilies bloom in patterns that mirror the sacred geometry of the original design. It's accidental art created by the intersection of human engineering and natural reclamation. Here's where it gets poetically appropriate. The jungle doesn't destroy the water system, it adapts it. Those carefully engineered drainage channels become route highways that carry nutrients throughout the forest. The stone-lined canals provide permanent water sources for wildlife during dry seasons. The terraced temple foundations create microclimates where different plant species establish vertical gardens that would make modern green architecture look amateur. Nature is essentially running the empire's infrastructure on a different operating system, one that prioritizes biodiversity over human convenience. The process isn't uniform. Some structures resist better than others. Temples built with the tightest stone joints and best drainage systems can survive centuries of botanical assault, emerging from the jungle like stone islands in a sea of green. Others surrender quickly, their looser construction providing easy entry points for roots that spread through the structure like botanical cancer. The jungle becomes an inadvertent quality control inspector, preserving only the empire's best engineering while recycling the rest into compost. But the most haunting transformations happen in the residential areas, where wooden houses have long since rotted away, leaving only the stone foundations of household water systems. You stumble across ancient bathroom drains now serving as planters for orchids, their stone channels redirecting rainwater to nourish flowers that bloom in colors the original builders never imagined. Private wells become miniature ecosystems where frogs breed in water that still flows through thousand-year-old filtration systems. The wildlife adapts to this hybrid landscape with impressive creativity. Monkeys use the ancient canal network as highways through the forest canopy, swinging from temple to temple along routes that mirror the water transportation system. Elephants follow the raised causeways that once carried royal processions, their massive feet wearing smooth the same stones that once felt the weight of ceremonial palanquins. Even the crocodiles seem to remember the old sacred pools, returning to specific temple sites during breeding season as if following ancestral memories encoded in their reptilian DNA. As evening light filters through the canopy, painting the ruins in shades of green and gold, you realize you're witnessing something unprecedented in human history. The complete botanical recycling of a major civilization. The jungle isn't destroying the Khmer Empire's hydraulic legacy, it's incorporating it into a new kind of water management system, one that operates on ecological principles rather than royal decrees. The same engineering that once sustained 1 million people now sustains 1 million other species, proving that good infrastructure design transcends the civilizations that create it. You're standing in the same spot where kings once bathed in sacred water, but now you're dodging selfie sticks and listening to tour guides explain hydraulic engineering through megaphones that echo off stones that have heard it all before. Welcome to modern Angkor, where 2 million tourists annually visit the ruins of a water empire, while inadvertently threatening the same aquifer systems that sustained it for 6 centuries. It's ironic in ways that would make ancient Khmer engineers laugh, cry, or possibly both simultaneously. The numbers are staggering in their modern absurdity. More people visit Angkor in a single year than lived in the empire's capital at its peak. They arrive in air-conditioned buses, stay in hotels with swimming pools that consume more water daily than entire medieval neighborhoods, and photograph temple reflections in moats that are slowly being drained by the very infrastructure built to accommodate their visits. The sacred springs of Phnom Kulen, where this entire hydraulic saga began, now supply bottled water to gift shops selling blessed beverages to tourists who have no idea they're drinking from the same sources that crowned God kings. But here's where it gets deliciously complicated. The modern water crisis isn't caused by climate change or political collapse, it's caused by success. Siem Reap's transformation from sleepy village to international tourist destination has created water demand that rivals the ancient empire's consumption, except modern visitors expect hot showers, flush toilets, and infinity pools that would have made Khmer royalty weep with envy. The underground aquifers that once sustained 1 million medieval citizens are now being pumped to fill hotel swimming pools where tourists float on inflatable unicorns while ancient temple towers watch in stone-faced judgment. The archaeological implications are keeping UNESCO officials awake at night with anxiety that would make ancient court astrologers look relaxed. Every new hotel, restaurant, and spa drills deeper wells that lower the water table, supporting temple foundations. Remember those brilliant subsurface drainage systems that kept Angkor Wat from sinking into the swamp? They're designed to work with specific groundwater levels that are dropping faster than a tourist's enthusiasm after their third temple visit in 100-degree heat. Modern engineers are essentially playing three-dimensional chess with a 1,000-year-old hydraulic system they're still trying to understand. They install monitoring equipment to track groundwater levels, but the data reveals problems faster than solutions can be implemented. Some temple foundations are beginning to settle as the water table drops, creating hairline cracks in structures that survived 6 centuries of monsoons, droughts, wars, and botanical invasion, only to be threatened by the economic success of their own rediscovery. The irony deepens when you realize that many tourists come specifically to see the water features, the moats, the reflection pools, the ancient reservoirs that made this civilization possible. But their presence is gradually draining the very aquifers that maintain these attractions. It's like a hydraulic catch-22, where the more people appreciate the water engineering, the more they threaten its continued existence. The West Beret, that monument to medieval hydraulic megalomania, now serves primarily as a scenic backdrop for Instagram photos, its water levels maintained more for tourism than for any practical purpose. The local communities caught in this modern water crisis would find the situation grimly familiar to their ancestors. Rural villages surrounding the temple complex still depend on wells and traditional water sources, but they're competing with luxury resorts that can afford to drill deeper and pump faster. It's a hydraulic hierarchy that mirrors the ancient social structure, except now the kings are hotel chains, and the peasants are farmers whose wells run dry, while tourists splash in pools filled with the same groundwater. Yet somehow, against all odds and environmental logic, parts of the ancient system continue functioning. The monsoon rains still fill the old reservoirs, though now they're managed by government agencies rather than royal engineers. The stone channels still carry water during flood season, though they're more likely to be photographed than used for actual transportation. Some of the original spillways continue regulating water flow with the same precision their builders intended, proving that good engineering transcends the civilizations that create it. The conservation efforts read like a collaboration between medieval hydraulic engineers and modern environmental scientists, Researchers use ground-penetrating radar to map ancient drainage systems, then work to restore their function using techniques that blend traditional knowledge with contemporary technology. Local communities are being trained to maintain the water features using methods their ancestors would recognize, creating a bridge between past and present that flows through the same channels that once sustained an empire. As the sun sets over Angkor Wat, painting the moat in shades of gold that have remained unchanged for 8 centuries, you realize you're witnessing the latest chapter in humanity's ongoing relationship with water management. The tourists will return to their air-conditioned hotels, the ancient stones will continue their patient wait for the next monsoon, and somewhere beneath your feet, groundwater continues flowing through channels carved by people who understood that civilizations rise and fall, but water always finds its way. The Khmer Empire's hydraulic legacy isn't preserved in museums or textbooks. It's still flowing beneath the surface, still supporting life, still demonstrating that the most enduring human achievements are those that work with natural systems rather than against them. In the end, the empire that built an entire city around water teaches us that our relationship with this precious resource is always temporary, but water itself is eternal, patient, and ultimately more powerful than any civilization that tries to control it. The night air carries the sound of water lapping against ancient stones, a gentle rhythm that has continued unbroken for 1,000 years. You close your eyes and listen to this liquid lullaby, imagining the countless generations who have heard this same sound. Kings and farmers, engineers and priests, tourists and archaeologists, all connected by the simple miracle of water finding its way through channels carved by human hands and shaped by time itself. The temples around you stand as monuments to ambition, but the water flowing past them represents something deeper, the recognition that true power lies not in controlling nature, but in learning to dance with it. The Khmer Empire understood this truth, building their civilization around water's rhythms rather than against them, creating a partnership that sustained millions of lives and continues to inspire wonder in everyone who encounters their liquid legacy. As sleep begins to claim you, the sound of flowing water becomes a meditation on impermanence and continuity, on the civilizations that rise and fall while rivers continue their ancient journey to the sea. The hydraulic empire of the Khmer may have ended, but its deepest wisdom flows on. That water, like time itself, always finds a way, always seeks its level, and always reminds us that we are temporary guests in a world where the only constant is change, and the only certainty is the eternal cycle of rain, river, and return. Sweet dreams, carried on the gentle current of history's most enduring lesson. In the end, we don't control water, we simply have the privilege of sharing its journey for a brief and precious moment in the endless flow of time.